Hello and welcome to Sussegat Stories from Goa. I'm your host, Clyde D'Souza. I'm a 3-time published author, media professional, and a Goan who loves everything about Goa. My latest book is called Sussegat, The Goan Art of Contentment. In my podcast, I chat with some famous and some of my favorite Goans, and together we explore Goa beyond its beaches. From Feni to Fado, Casa to Cashews, come discover Goa like you've never done before. Frederick Noronha was born in Sao Paulo, Brazil. He grew up in Goa and later on spent many years as an eminent Goan journalist. He has a PhD on publishing in Goa. He has over 6,000 photographs on Flickr. He runs a YouTube channel with over 2 million views. But what I think is his absolute greatest contribution is being the creator of an independent publishing house called Goa 1556, which has published over 140 titles. If you want to know the story of Goa and its storytellers, Frederick Noronha is your man. Now, normally, I've seen Frederick on YouTube interview all sorts of Goans from all walks of life. But today, it's my honor to interview the man, Frederick Noronha himself. Welcome, Frederick, to the Sussegat Stories podcast.
Thanks, Clyde. You've given me a big build-up, and I don't know whether I'll be able to live up to it. Anyway, here goes.
You already do. Pleasure to have you on the podcast. Okay, so Frederick, my audience is from all sorts of people from inside Goa, outside Goa, people who are new to the podcast, people who want to know stories about Goa, and I think you are the person who has kind of brought these stories to life. But before we get into all of that, I want to ask you something which will give our audience a sense of where you are. Can you tell me where in Goa you're talking to us from?
So I live in a place called Saligaon, which is 8 kilometers northwest of Panjim. It's actually quite in between Panjim, Mapsa and Kalangut, but it's a village. It's a kind of urbanized, our villages in Goa are not so rural. So it's a village which is in between these three places.
Yeah, it has a beautiful church, right? I mean, which has a Gothic architecture, right. Isn't it? Madhideu Church in Saligaon?
Right. It was built in the 1870s, which is late by Goan standards for a church. So it's basically the only Gothic church that has been built in Goa in that sense,
Yeah, Saligaon is quite beautiful. True. Now, I've always been a reader, okay? Obviously, before I was a writer and before I became a writer. As a child, I think my aunt gave me my very first book and I was about 10 or 11, I think. It was on my birthday that she gave me this collection of famous 5 stories by Enid Blyton, okay? And I was hooked and I started reading the book during my birthday party itself. So that's when I can remember that as my first time that I fell in love with books and reading. So do you remember when and how you yourself got into reading and books?
Actually, Clyde, our generation was very much into books and radio in that sense. No, we kind of grew up with them and we loved them, and we didn't have too many distractions. The net was not there, and cyberspace was absent, and things like that. So, I still remember the librarians, the reading tables where I got started, the magazines we read, and we had to struggle to get reading material in those days. It wasn't easy, but it was fun. It was great.
Absolutely. I mean, for us, our Twitter and our Instagram were literally the pages on some dog-eared book at maybe some family's or friend's house. True. So yeah, that was how I guess a lot of us kind of got into the whole. It was sometimes distraction, it was sometimes exhilaration, sometimes an adventure when you couldn't go out. So books became our solace. Coming to my next question now, as a 3-time author, I've written 3 books. I'm always in awe of publishers and the work they do, the work that you do rather. The power that you publishers have, the responsibility that you have. You are like the gatekeepers, the promoters of stories and of storytellers. So I want to ask you, as someone who's, I think, probably the only publisher in Goa, what was the moment that made you decide to get into the world of publishing?
Actually, to put things in perspective, I've been a journalist all my life since 83 onwards, since the age of 19. And then along the way, I kept feeling that the Goa story is not being told. So at that stage, sometime around 2007, I actually thought like, let's pitch in and try to get into publishing to almost jump to straddle the divide and to jump over from one side of the fence to another side of the fence. And at that time, almost around the same time, 2005, the National Book Trust, Government of India, they have been holding a series of very interesting publishing courses, and they held one in Goa then, in Panjim. So me and 3-4 of my other close friends joined it, and some of us ended up as publishers.
And now we have to tell our audience the name of your publishing house, which we haven't. And the name has a history behind it, and it has a story behind it. So the name of your publishing house is, of course, Goa 1556. And how did you come up with the name? Why did you come up with the name? I know a little bit about it, but can you please share the background?
See, when I was a kid, okay, I remember going to Mapsa and going every week to this bookshop and asking them, have the children's books come? And they said, no, they've not come now, but try next week. And there were no children's books in those days. Later on, everyone talks about the Soviet books, which made things accessible. And there were a few books within India. There were a few magazines like Sunshine coming from Pune. Of course, Junior Statesman was there. And then Sun came up, but that was later on. When I was in the 6th or 7th standard, there were no books available. And then suddenly, as a journalist, I get this chance to go on a short scholarship to Germany to study journalism. And they take us to Mannheim, which is this town very close to where the first printing press was, invented by Gutenberg, the Gutenberg style printing press. I go to this printing press and I buy this souvenir for 10 marks. And then I look inside, and to my shock and horror, I find a story mentioned there that first printing press in Asia, Goa, 1556. So that was the year in which it came. So then I think to myself, how, I've been thinking for a long time, how do I kind of align these two facts that the first printing press came to Goa? And when I'm growing up in the same Goa, we have no books here, So in that sense, that was what some of my research later on was all about. But I thought that, let's use this name as a kind of a bait to make people think, about Goa's role in history. Goa is this tiny place which hardly matters in terms of geography, but in terms of history, it was this meeting point, clashing point, whatever you want to call it, of cultures. So in that sense, I wanted to keep the name as something that would make people think of why 1556. That was the year in which the first printing press in Asia was set up in Goa, and it came here by accident. It was supposed to go elsewhere, to Ethiopia or Abyssinia as it was called then. And that's that. So that's how the name came about. And everyone asked me why did it come? And so I never spare a chance to give this big sermon on the history of Goan printing, Asian printing, and accidents of history in that sense.
No, it's a fascinating sermon. Where did you start the publishing house from? Was it from your home? Was it like how Apple started from a garage? What was it?
It's basically it's like not even a mom and pop shop, though my wife does help me, but it's just a dad shop, like where I've been running it from I'm sitting here on this table, which has a workstation and all. It's just at the side of my dining table. So it's extremely small, and in the last 2, 3, 4 years, I've been a bit disillusioned by the way publishing has been moving both in Goa and the rest of the country. If you look at Scroll, you'll find one of my huge lemons written there. But, I've been thinking of options to the model we are following, which had been small, alternative, kind of using 4 or 5 different financial models to make the book work. I've been dreaming more of shaping it up into a kind of an author's cooperative, which if it works and if it actually happens might achieve my goal of creating space for writing in that sense.
Great. So you're like you said, a one man army, and not a mom and pop shop, but a pop shop. Amazing. And in your little dining table in your house in Saligao. Yeah. So you were born in Sao Paulo, right? In Brazil.
Right.
And when did you then come to Goa?
So as you know, Clyde, most Goan, particularly Catholic Goans, tend to be very strong into migration. So all of us have a migration story. So my dad was working for some contractors in Jamshedpur at the steel plant, Tata's. And the contractors finished their job and they were going to set up another steel plant in Brazil. So he was in his 20s and he went there with my mom in the 50s, and they stayed on for almost a decade. We came back in 66. So I've been in Goa for the last 5.5 decades in that sense. So don't work backwards and calculate my age, but you know it. So, in that sense, I've been here all along and struggling to understand Goa as we go along, because when you come back to home, quote unquote home, you kind of imagine that this is a place and I'm sure it happens to many migrants, regardless of which state they are from in India today. Goans a bit more because our migration story goes deeper and it starts earlier and we are a smaller community and all those kind of things. So when you come back home, you're still struggling to find out what's this place you call home and you don't even have a clue. So in that sense, I think my attempt to get into books, to get into reading also had a lot to do with trying to understand the place. So I came back in
Yeah.
66. Yeah.
Yeah, I think my generation and also your generation, we were kind of caught between this pre-colonization, colonization. I was 10, I think, when Goa finally got its statehood,
Actually.
and I didn't even know what it meant. You just spoke about home, which is such a loaded word. And home for us, especially for Goans, is a multi-varied thing. And you grew up in Goa and you've been chronicling Goa and Goans, for decades now. And of course, you've told the stories of so many Goans. Now, again, as a writer, I have to say this, but I always suffer from something called imposter syndrome. I found out what this term was while I was writing my books. And basically, imposter syndrome is someone who feels, that he's fake. Right. So whenever I'm writing a new book, I always think, who am I to give all this gyan? Why am I the one to be writing this? I'm not even worthy enough. I'm not an expert to tell this story, and thereby bring these stories to so many thousands of readers. So that's what I suffer from sometimes when I'm writing a book. Now, as an editor and a publisher, you, Frederick, how do you filter all the stories that come to you, all the manuscripts that come to you? What is it that you look for and you see as something that is authentic and worth picking up and publishing?
So imposter syndrome is something which all of us have, and I also, I mean, have it in that sense. It's something positive. Maybe at least it keeps us humble and reminds us that we are not the cat's whiskers or something like that. So when choosing a story, basically, see, if you've been in journalism, if you've been in print, you also get this intuitive feeling that something is well told. Maybe something has a few mistakes, but can be corrected. It got all its facts right. We are more into non-fiction, so that's a slightly easier to judge field. Fiction is very subjective, and I don't really enjoy fiction. We
Hmm.
don't do much of it, but non-fiction is not so difficult. If you find, I don't think we've got any single author who has told a story badly or so badly that it cannot be corrected. Most of them are hugely passionate about their field, so they know exactly what they're talking about. You would find something jarring there and something incorrect, which can always be corrected along the way.
So you're filled with stories, and you've been now publishing books since 2007, which is about 15 years now and counting, and over 140 titles, if I'm not mistaken.
Right,
All
right.
sorts of topics like the aboli, which is a Goa state flower, to stories of Portuguese Goa, to even books on Konkani language. You have just briefly mentioned some of the challenges, but can you tell us, what were some of the successes of Goa 1556, and what were some of the maybe the drawbacks or the challenges that you
Yeah.
faced?
So you always discover this amazing story which kind of surprises you. To give two examples, we did a book on the Goans in Burma, and at that stage, people had vague memories that there were Goans in Burma. But when this lady, Yvonne Vazezdani, collated all the stories and put it together, the depth and the vastness of it shocked everyone, because they were caught up in the Japanese bombing of Burma on Christmas Day 1942, and they trekked back to India. Many of them, some came by boat, and the story was so fascinating that one of the mainstream publishers in India, I think Speaking Tiger, if I'm not mistaken, came out with a second edition of the book, wherein they put a lot of stories of Indians in Burma as well, together with the Goans in Burma, to make it more broad based. So before that, the story of Indians in Burma was not even told in that sense. So we
And that
feel
was published
happy.
by Goa 1556.
The
Wow.
first edition, yes, and then they went in for a second edition, which
Amazing.
we encourage our authors to grow beyond us, so that's fine. That's absolutely no problem. And the
No,
second
that's awesome.
story was about this lady called Sita Wallace, who was 26 years old, and she was a radical revolutionary, a communist in Angola, and she supports the revolution, and then she goes to Portugal and comes back to Angola and realizes that things are going awry there, and corruption is growing, and this revolutionary government is going on the wrong road, and she and her friends, they organize a counter coup against the government. Although she's radical and they are radical, but they are different brands of radical during this Cold War, kind of Soviet China, Cuba kind of conflicts that were going on. And then I kind of find this article on the Portuguese Wikipedia. I don't read Portuguese, but I just Google it and search it and use Google Translate to understand it. And I realized that with a name like Sita, okay, Wallace could be anything. Wallace is one of these Lusophone Portuguese surnames. But Sita, like, obviously she has to have some connection with India. If it's India, it's probably Goa. And then she turns out to be 26-year-old Goan who was caught after the coup and killed, and she refused to blindfold herself when the soldiers shot her. A totally heroic story. And, I managed to get republication rights from the author in Portugal who actually wrote a book on her just a little while before we republished it here. So there
my God, that is fascinating. So what is this book called? I mean, it reads, I mean, you just narrated it so beautifully, and I feel like I was watching a movie. So what is this book called?
So it's I like how if you have too many children, you're going to forget their names. So I forget the names of my books. So, but if you Google for Sita Wallace, Walles, you'll find it.
Great. Wow. So clearly you are a scholar, because you also have a PhD, right, in English, which is focused on publishing in the 20th century in Goa, right? If I'm not mistaken.
I don't
which
claim
is
to
clearly
be
showing.
I don't claim to be a scholar. I'm not a scholar. I'm just an accidental publisher, accidental scholar. I did my PhD at the age of 50 when I was bored with my other journalistic work and publishing work.
Yeah, amazing. No, you're just being very humble, Frederick.
But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it, and I refused to use those 2 alphabets before or 3 alphabets after my name, because I feel that I enjoyed it so much. I learned so much from the full process, and there was no pressure, in that sense. I was not doing it like for a job or anything of that sort. I just enjoyed doing it. I would really tell anyone, if they are interested, go ahead, do it. You'll enjoy the process. It's quite fun, provided you get a good topic and a good guide. Those are two.
Yeah, I guess what another way of what you're saying is that when you love something so much, it doesn't feel like work, and you're not doing it for any kind of external validations or anything. You're just doing it because you love the subject so much. True. So what did you uncover during this PhD of yours?
Actually, I put it this way also. I used this PhD as a kind of an excuse to again continue understanding Goa. So for me, the book was just an excuse to understand the history of Goa. And there's a whole lot of myths about the history of Goa and misunderstandings and stereotypes. And, then you try to understand Goa in the context of British colonialism, which is not exactly the right thing to do, because the British came 200 years later, and the Portuguese came in times where even the idea of colonialism was very different, whether it's in West Asia, whether it's in Goa, Sri Lanka, Malacca, all over. Gujarat, Surat, the east coast of India. They wanted these pockets which would help them to control and sew up the kind of sea trade which they wanted to control and profit over. As a result of which, their relations with the locals were very different in terms of, collaboration and exploitation and whatever. It was a different level altogether. So I use this full thesis as a way to understand, the history of Goa in that sense. And
right, fascinating. I mean, really fascinating, Frederick. I mean, there's just so much of it's like literally it's like layers of a bibink, right? Which you can just go on and on, going deep into the entire thing. And I hope that your study is available somewhere. And maybe,
it is.
So now, as someone we are not politicians, we are not in that sphere of the world. We are maybe the gatherers of stories, and you are the promoter of these stories. So what do you think is should be, or rather what do you think are the new stories emerging from this new Goa, whatever it is that we are witnessing?
Actually, Clyde, your question reminds me that there's not one Goa, there are many Goas. Like, my friends used to say there are 8 Goas, like, based on religion, based on geography, based on class, based on so many things. So many stories are still not getting told, I would say, because of our backgrounds, we are biased towards a certain kind of a story, like, okay, it may be Catholic, it may be middle class, it may be expat driven, but there are so many other Goas which say Hindu Goa, for example, interior Goa, younger Goa in that sense, so those stories are really not emerging, I feel. And I have a certain sense of guilt also that we are not doing enough to get these stories out. Gender, for example, along gender lines. So some of our work books happen to be written by women authors. It's just that way because it happens that way. It's not that we have made a conscious effort to get these stories out. So a lot of things are waiting to be told. Now, for example, the neo settlers in Goa, for example, people who have settled in Goa, whether rich or poor or whatever it is, I think they need a voice, they need their own voice, and they need to be telling their own stories. It's just not happening, no? So
Yeah,
we
I'm
can,
pleasantly surprised that that you have taken such a accepting view of it, because I guess that's what it is, right? We might call them neo settlers, we might
yeah.
call them bhaile, which is outsiders, but the fact is that it is what it is, and like you said, they also have their stories, and they need to be told. So let's maybe I'm hoping that you are getting some writers who are of these tribes, and maybe some of these stories will come out from your
I had
publishing
this
house.
friend. I had this friend called Alito Sequeira, who was a prominent sociologist at at Goa University, senior to me, much senior to me. And he would always say, "Y'all are so elitist. Y'all are so one-sided in your views." And I used to feel guilty about it. Then it struck me that the full process of literature creation is actually elitist. No, it's not like sociology where a person without literacy can tell their own story if someone is willing to listen to them. Here you need pen, you need paper, you need literacy, you need someone to publish your work. You need that kind of luxury to sit down and write it for over such a long period. So in a sense, yes, there is a bias there, no doubt.
Yeah, no, you're right. It is a bit elitist, but and now that comes to my next question, because you have gone beyond a little bit of this elitism, I would say, because I mean it is also it's not elitist in that sense, but what you have done is also you have gone onto the internet, right? You're very active on the internet. So if I'm not mistaken, you run the Goa Book Club, right, on Google
Right,
Groups,
right.
where discussions are from everything from a photo book on Goa's hidden heritage to memoriams on the late Mrs. Maria Aurora Koto, who just passed away, right? So in that sense, you're going beyond just a published work, but you're keeping this entire thing alive. Now, you yourself have like a YouTube channel. So you've moved on to YouTube. The channel has over 2 million views. I was amazed when I saw that. I was like, wow, this is great and well deserved. Great content on it, from Konkani lessons to interviews with a Goan Portuguese singer. I can't remember his name right now, but he sang beautifully on the channel. And I think you've interviewed him a couple of times. Chico, I think his name is, if I'm not mistaken.
Fonseca,
Yes,
right.
Chico Fonseca. Yeah. Beautiful, brilliant. It's just, so what you're doing is, again, you're keeping all of this alive, not only to print, but through video. And that's not elitist. So that's amazing. So are you planning to do a lot more video stories? And are you planning to like maybe enrich the production, for lack of a better word? I mean, I like it how it is. It's raw, it's
No,
beautiful.
it's raw, it's rough. I'm not, see, I want to do more. I love to, that I love the medium, but I'm not going to improve the quality for sure. Because I think there is a politics of economics in that sense. Once I aim for better quality, I'll need a bigger team, I'll need more expenses, and also as of now, it's totally volunteer driven, and I do it like at a drop of a hat. No, it doesn't take me any effort. I don't even bother to edit. Okay, everyone is going to fault me for this and say what an idiot this guy is, but I don't mind them saying it. But I don't bother to edit my work. I just put it out raw up there. I'm giving you the story. You like it, you take it as it is. This is not the best approach, I agree, but it's a most practical approach for me. And I feel that, a lot can be done. A lot of people are doing things. Clyde, one point I want to make. See, a lot of people are creating work on Goa. The only difference between them and me is that I believe in sharing. I put it out there. I believe in making it visible. I'll share very promiscuously, if I could use that word. Because sharing has its own dynamics, and the sharer also gains as much as the person receiving it gains. So this is something I believed in from the late 1990s when I was part of this free software open source movement. You can create great works collaboratively. That's all I believe, So
No, I
that's
mean,
the
it's
only
clear
difference.
that you are a champion of open source, and that comes through in everything that you do, from letting your authors go from your publishing house to a bigger publishing house, to putting up this content for free, shooting your videos raw. It's truly amazing, So now the other thing that I want to ask you is that with all of this change that is happening, right? Uh, what is it that you kind of, I think, answered this question, but what do you think is your legacy? What is your story, so to say?
I just want people to, if people exist and the world exists in proper shape, to some years later, understand themselves, where they are coming from, what makes Goa Goa, what makes us what we are. I think if we can solve a bit of that jigsaw, we would have done our job. But more than that, what I'm finding is that people are actually, taking the cues and carrying on at a much deeper level in directions which we never anticipated. No, and that is a huge blessing. You suddenly realize that you are building off the backs of others, and other people are getting inspired by your work, which is all. I mean, what more could you ask for in that sense?
Very well said. I mean, I have used this line many times. We're all standing on the shoulders of giants,
True.
and you might, I mean, I know you're very humble, but you are a giant, and we have all stood on your shoulders. Yeah, but I
Agreed.
think, I mean, I think your legacy is the fact that you have done all of this pretty much without any intention of major profitability or anything of that sort. It's just pure passion. You work tirelessly for decades now.
No, but I have this feeling, Clyde. I have this feeling that after us, there are going to be many more who come up and who are going to take it much more forward.
They
I'm
will.
confident about this because the tools allow you to do it. No, the tools are allowing us. Now, see, we can talk. I don't. I mean, like you're in Mumbai, correct? Which part? I don't even have a clue.
Yeah. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, and the beauty of it is that even though we have all stood on the shoulders of giants and all of that, there will be bigger giants who will come.
Of
And I
course.
think we are all doing our part, and you have done your part for it. So now I just want to come to the next question of mine, which is that now in my book, okay, what I've tried to do. I know you mentioned you don't publish fiction, but what I tried to do, because my challenge was, okay, there is this word susegad. How do I make people fall in love with the right aspects of this word and not the word as Goans call it, which is lazy or what the stereotype, right?
Yeah.
It was a real challenge for me, and I tried, my humblest best to bring about a wholesome, balanced approach to it, right? Because it was that was the challenge for me, and I tried to include fiction, a bit of there's
It's a nice
every
book. It's
chapter
well
has.
done. It's well done, and it's got a good get up also, and
Thank you. That means a
impressive.
lot
It's
coming from you.
not an easy job to do because it's a difficult concept.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what that real challenge was that. So I've tried to include, there's non-fiction, of course, there's culture, there is every chapter has a fiction story to it. It has interviews, with the prominent Goans and all of that. And now I want to ask you, what is your advice to writers, to young writers, or maybe old writers, or whoever who wants to write, whether from Goa or outside Goa? What is it that you would tell them? What's your advice to them as someone who has now done this for 15 years and more?
So basically, write from your heart. Don't think that you're standing on a pedestal and giving a speech. Imagine that you're talking to your granddaughter, and this is what the story you want to let them know about. Tell it what's and all. If there's some problems, mention it. If you feel that you can that you're honest enough to tell it. Write about stories which you know. Write about subjects which you feel strongly about, and your story is definitely going to come out good. Yeah, believe me in that sense. I think that non-fiction is a bigger challenge than fiction. No, fiction, all of us have an opinion and we think it's the best story and all that, but non-fiction it's really tough to convince others and to get a good story in place. Do
Yeah, I
it.
agree. I mean,
You'll
for me,
love it.
I always say that fiction is actually just disguised non-fiction, actually,
True.
and non-fiction is the meat of the story, the
True.
real, that's where the real story lies, if people can kind of get through it,
True.
right? Yeah, so that's great. I mean, thanks, Frederick. It was amazing everything that you've said. I've really enjoyed it. But this is not the end of the podcast. We now move to our what I call the Susegad Secrets segment.
Okay.
Yeah. So in this segment, Frederick, I want to ask you what Suseg, which is peace, and what does that mean to you? What is your Susegad secret?
So my Susegad secret is 2500-year-old secret from the Buddha. Like, in that sense, minimize your wants and don't have any cravings. Take what comes, and that's life. And I think Goa had a lot of this in the past, though now we are catching up with the global mainstream, unfortunately. It was such a simple society, and we were all the more richer when it was simple, no? Richer not in the
Yes,
monetary sense, but in every other sense.
but I'm seeing a revolution happening where people are realizing that having everything that you want, which is materialistic or comfort or convenience, still does not bring happiness. And I think there is a shift happening towards simplicity, and that's why things like Susegad or
True,
all of these
true,
concepts of meditation and Buddhism and
true.
minimalism, it's all coming. We don't know how much, because I think human beings are kind of lazy and they
Yeah.
they tend to lean towards convenience, but we can hope that simplicity, like you said, becomes the
Clyde,
Suke Susigat secret.
there was this group
Yeah.
of young Bombay Goans or even others who came back to Goa in the 70s. Again, Claude Alvarez, Alexi Fernandez, the cartoonist, Joss
Yeah.
Peter, the lawyer, and a whole lot of them, they came to escape the rat race from Bombay. And the kind of impact they all made in their respective fields was amazing. The way they've influenced the Goan debate is amazing.
Yes, absolutely. So my next question is something I think which is very important to me, at least, because I think that the question that I'm going to ask you is about love, because I think love is transformative. It creates the passion. Like your love for Goa, for your home, has made you choose a life which has kind of given you purpose. So what is the meaning of love to you?
Love is, from my youngest days in my 20s, I used to believe that love is about chemicals. When your chemicals are right, you're enjoying the thing you're doing, whatever it is, then it works. Okay, so whether it is doing a kind of job or being with the person you are interested in or whatever it is, that's love in that sense. Chemicals change a long time, and that's very sad. It can be sad also, which is why some of the best songs in the world are about love gone awry.
Heartbreak.
Yeah, heartbreak. So that's
love
it.
for you is chemicals. Wow.
Love for me is chemicals.
That's fascinating. Okay, fascinating. We'll take that answer. Amazing. Okay, so now to my next segment. It's called the rapid fire segment. It's just fun and quick one word answers.
Fine.
If you can manage to do that. So okay, so the first question is your favorite Goan book.
My favorite Goan author is this guy who influenced me from the time I was 20, is Robert Newman, anthropologist from Marblehead, Massachusetts. And we recently republished 2 of his works. From my early days, he influenced me a lot. He writes about sociological issues, Goa, the transformation of Goa, the sociology of religion, all these kind of things. Fascinating. He can write about any subject under the sun, including stamps that the Portuguese issued, And,
Amazing.
And he'll tell you a fascinating story about it. Of course, we disagree on some points, but I still hold him as one of the dearest influences in my growth.
Amazing. We will check it out for sure. Okay, what's your favorite non-Goan book?
I always found it much more productive to read magazines, so I can give you 10 names for magazines. But
okay, give me a couple.
So JS when we were kids, Illustrated Weekly when we were young, Outlook, Vinod Mehta was my big time hero in that sense, as far as running a magazine and newspaper goes. Many newspapers. Wow. And a whole lot of other magazines in times where we could Sunday Ande Akbar and a whole lot of others, when there were so few magazines in the country, every one which we could lay our hands on, we would read from start to finish.
Yeah. All of us were really voracious readers at that time because we didn't have much.
That time we had time but nothing to read. Today we have too much to read and no time. So it's the same.
Yes.
As they say in Konkani, daan thapoi tenna chone naan, chone apoi tenna daan na. When you have teeth, you have no gram, and when you have gram, you have no teeth.
Yes, lovely. I'm glad you answered that because I have a question coming up about a Konkani phrase, but you've given me a bonus Konkani phrase. Yeah. So great. So my next question is one Goan, maybe not in the publishing world or not in the author or writer world, one Goan who has influenced you in your life.
My school teacher, this guy called Ivan Rocha, who was such a weird guy, and he was our English teacher, and I hated the English language. But when I look back, I have tears in my eyes just thinking how much the guy shaped us. In terms of reading, in terms of general knowledge, and a few other librarians. I've even thanked the reading table in my village library, in my village club. So these are the influences. My godmother, of course, who always encouraged me to read. So
that's touching, really.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Who is a young Goan storyteller who you think could be the future voice of Goa?
There are many. There are quite a few, in that sense.
Anyone who comes to your mind.
Fiction you're talking about? Fiction, non-fiction?
Either. You can give me one non-fiction, one
some
fiction.
of my favorites are Jessica Falero and Jose Lorenzo.
Great. Thank you. Okay, my next question is your favorite typical Goan thing to do.
I'm useless here for all this because I've not been to a beach for years and things like that. And,
but no, not typical Goan thing to do, but typical local Goan thing to do. Let me put it that way.
So people who know me well call me an inverted snob because I'll go to this cheapest of cheap joints and
the best
and have some fish curry rice there. So I enjoy my fish curry rice. I enjoy it simple,
me too. Which is the local fish joint? Please name it. I mean,
Anand
I'm going to go there.
Anand Ashram in Panjim, next to the post office. Please go there. So
I've
we've
never
been
been.
eating there
I
from the
should.
time it was priced at 5 rupees, the rice plate. Now it's about 80 or 110, I think.
Yeah,
Plus
that's
now.
still amazing. Okay,
Yeah.
Anand Ashram,
Fish
next to
curry
the post
rice
office.
in Panjim.
Yes, great. I will do that. All right. Okay. Normally, what I do is because I think that if someone wants to love a place, they need to love the language. They need to, of course,
True.
explore the place. They need to explore the people. So one of the things I want to do is, of course, teach people the Konkani phrase, or an idiom, So can you, share one Konkani phrase that you always use or that you like, and
Yeah.
tell us the meaning of it and maybe an example of it?
So my favorite is, of course, there are a lot more colorful and ones which cannot be said on podcast. But my favorite one, which can be said, is "I Saiba." I Saiba, like I Saiba means, oh Lord, it can mean anything from shock to dismay to goodness gracious to what are you doing, like what the heck, something like that. So like it can also mean sorry, like my goodness, it's my bad, it's my mistake. It can mean so many things, and I find myself using it so often because it's so ambiguous in what it means. You take what it means from whatever the context is.
Yes, it's a brilliant phrase. I mean, I've had it used on me from when I did certain naughty things to
I
things
see.
where as kids, right?
I see.
So yes, it's a really great phrase for sure. Yeah, lovely. Yeah, so thank you, Frederick. I have really enjoyed this entire conversation, and I've learned so much about how an independent publishing house has made such a big impact on not only Goa but on India, and it will leave a legacy for decades to come and centuries, hopefully. And we'll all stand on the shoulders of all sorts of giants, one of them being you. And I'm going to continue. I've subscribed to your channel. I'm going to watch more videos, and I'm going to enjoy the vicarious love for Goa that I have from here till I can come to Goa next. So thank you for coming on the Susegad Stories podcast, Frederick. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
But don't cut this out. But the praise is totally outlandish and undeserved. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you, Frederick.
Bye.
Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of Susegad Stories from Goa. Do subscribe if you're a new listener and join a community of people who love and live the Goan lifestyle. Again, I'm Clyde D'Souza, and for more Goan content, you can follow me on Instagram at Clyde D'Souza Author. This podcast is brought to you by Bound, a company that helps you grow through stories. Follow them at Bound India on all social platforms for updates on this podcast, or take a look at their other podcasts. Moga Suni, and see you soon.